I think it's safe to say at this point of the season, we're beyond just worrying about these players who aren't doing very well on our teams. We want to know, what do we do with them? All right. So, are you panicked? Yeah, of course you're panicked. That's why we're discussing them. But do you keep? Do you trade? Or do you cut? And we didn't think we would be here with some of these players, but here we go. Let's start with the number one catcher in all fantasy drafts, the guy we thought would be a absolutely safe fantasy pick, as if that's a thing. William Contreras for the Brewers. Now it's also funny because this always happens, right? Get ready to talk about a player, and usually after I finish saying, well, this guy hasn't hit a home run in 2 weeks, and then the very next day when this video comes out, then he hits a home run. But in this case, Contreras decided not to wait. He actually just hit a home run today on Mother's Day. And okay, that's great, but that doesn't change the fact that he's still hitting just 237 on the season with a 341 slugging percentage. Keep in mind the league average is 392, so not just disappointing, but way below average. And of course, when you draft him as the number one catcher and one of the top picks on your fantasy squad, you expect, let's just say, a little bit better. Now, the RBIs and the runs scored have actually been pretty solid, 21 of each. So it's not like he's been a total waste, but man, you expect him to have a really good average, maybe close to 300, and instead he's kind of hurting you in that category. And the power, well, okay, he hit a home run, it's just his fourth of the season. But here's the thing, okay, slow start, fine, not worry too much. There is a reason to worry about Contreras, and it's the finger. Yeah, I know you want to give all of these guys the middle finger here, but this case, it's specifically the middle finger on his left hand. William Contreras, it was confirmed, has a fracture in it. And normally that would be a little better to say, well, it's not his throwing hand, but seeing as how he's a catcher, this is worse. It's his receiving hand. And so it is not going to get a break whatsoever. They can DH him from time to time, but look, he's a catcher. He's going to catch. So you got to really now start to wonder, how much is this going to impact him the rest of the season? Because you can't pretend that it's not. It already has in terms of his offense. This explains a lot of why he has struggled. Is this just a matter of time before he hits the IL? And then you're staring at a big void at the catcher position. Is this a time maybe to move on from him while he still has that name value? On the one hand, I don't feel like his season is done for. I mean, he still managed to actually be fairly productive for the most part, other than batting average. And really, his plate discipline has been really good. He's still taking walks, even more than before, actually. He's not striking out that much. He's not performing as badly as one with a fractured finger probably should have, but I can't just say that he'll be back to what he was last year for the rest of the way. Now, there is really no pressing reason to cut him. He hasn't been that bad. There have been other catchers, as I talked about last week with Adley Rutschman, who have done worse, but I'm still holding on to. So, you're not cutting him. The question is keep or trade. And to that, I would say I'm okay exploring a trade. I'm worried about the potential IL stint coming down the road. I'm worried that something happens, he exacerbates this injury, or that he just doesn't hit like he did last year. And you know what? It's been interesting this year. We've had a ton of catchers available on the waiver wire who are actually performing pretty well. I mean, you could have picked up these rookies like Augustin Ramirez or Edgar Caro, who are, better off as your second catcher in a two-catcher league, but are still playable in one-catcher leagues. Then there are players like Carson Kelly and Hunter Goodman, who've kind of come out of nowhere to have really good starts to the season. Ivan Herrera, I just talked about, has been on IL. If he's available, you go grab him. You can start him every day pretty much. And Tyler Stevenson for the Reds. You got a lot of good options at catcher. So if you can get something of value for Contreras, I think you ought to do it right now. Another big name early draftee that you expected a lot more from is Ozzie Albies of the Braves. And honestly, I could have put half of the Braves lineup in this segment because they've all been underwhelming except for now Austin Riley figuring out, and of course, Marcell Ozuna. Look, we tried to remain patient here with a guy like Albies, who has had great seasons before. Ronald Acuna is going to come back at some point. The Braves are going to figure it out, right? At some point. How long before we just say, maybe not? And I'm not saying the Braves as a whole can't get better, but is Albies specifically going to get better? This every other year thing, it's not playing out that way so far. After Sunday, his batting average in the season is down to 213. Got 5 homers, 5 steals. Fine. Okay. I didn't want okay when I drafted Ozzie Albies. It was like a 3rd or 4th round pick. And nothing in his profile honestly points to him being close to fine. His expected batting average is just as bad as his real average. It's at 212, 8th percentile. The bat speed is what really stands out here. What is going on here? Because he, as far as we know, has no physical limitations, no injuries right now. He's been out there every day. But man, this does not look like nearly the same hitter. So I'll be honest, if I was doing panic right now and I was going to throw out that panic meter, okay, you know what? Let's put it out there. Let's throw it out. The panic meter on Ozzie Albies is about an 8 right now because even though, yes, he can get better, I'm not sure if I can point to a reason why he will get demonstrably better and to make it worth holding on to him the rest of the season. So this is another one of those guys that you can't cut, but I really don't want to keep him if I don't have to. I know second base isn't the deepest position out there, but come on, how many players are there out there on the waiver wire who aren't doing just as good as Albies, honestly? Jorge Polanco, Brendan Donovan, Dylan Moore, Gleyber Torres, even all these guys have been better than Albies this season. And so while his trade value may not be very high because of the numbers, he's got that name recognition. He's on the Braves offense, who I think a lot of people are still just convinced is one of the best offenses in the league, even though they have not performed like that for now over a year and a half. So I think you trade Albies now. So how about another second baseman who was hot to start and is now cooled down? Is it time to move on from Christian Campbell of the Red Sox? I can't say he's one of those second basemen who has been better than Ozzie Albies so far this season, although the batting average has been better. He's at 264. 4 home runs, only 2 steals. You know, like with all of these high end prospects, especially in a big market team like Boston, we get all hyped up when they debut, and when they get off to a good start, we go crazy, and then it's very quick to just forget about them as soon as they cool down. That's what's happening with Campbell. People are just ready to ditch him. Am I just going to say, hey, he's young, stay patient here? Yes, I am. No, overall, the numbers are pretty good. Again, he's been up and down. Young players will do that. But I like the fact that the plate discipline has not been an issue. His chase rate is only in the 77th percentile, which means he's not going after bad pitches that much. He's walking a bunch, and I think he will stick around. I don't see him getting demoted, and I think that he will figure things out. The one thing that I noticed with him that he's going to have to adjust to, again, as pitchers adjust to him, he's going to have to make that adjustment back. He's hitting the daylights out of the fastball. Again, both four seamers and sinkers, batting 306 against that pitch type. Not so good against the others, against breaking balls, hitting 214, and against off-speed pitches, just 200. You can't be a hitter who only hits the fastball, but again, it's a 6 experience. He's going to see more of these pitchers, their best sliders, their changeups, and he'll figure it out. He'll realize he can't just sit fastball only. Boston's a good team. The offense is now awake. I think he'll figure it out. I'm getting the benefit of the doubt to the elite athlete here. So as far as Campbell, I think for the most part, if you got him, you're just going to keep him. How about one more middle infielder who is struggling, surprisingly to some, not to me. You know, I mentioned Willy Adames several times here. I'm going to say it again. Sorry. But for those of you who are new, I called Willy Adames a bust in my preseason draft bust video. I did not want any part of him this season, and I have zero regrets about that because he has been a bust. There's no two ways about it. Right now, he's hitting 217, an on-base percentage below 300, 4 homers, 2 stolen bases. Really, other than scoring some runs in that Giants lineup, not doing anything to help your fantasy team. And you got to think, okay, well, this is a player who just came off his best season yet, and he's still only 29 years old. He's got to turn it around, right? I really don't think so. I mean, to some extent, he can get better, but let's look at the fact that 217 isn't that shocking for him. In fact, just 2 years ago, before his great season in Milwaukee, he hit 217 for the season. He's mirroring that. And even last year, in his best season, he hit 251. Batting average is not his thing, right? This is a guy with a ton of power for a shortstop, and he can steal. But oh, here's the thing. He was with Milwaukee, who we know is a team that is stealing bases like no other team. They're first in the league right now in stolen base attempts per game, and that's not going to stop. So Adames got the green light way more than he would have because he was on a very run-happy offense, and this year he's on the Giants. Giants right now are 25th in stolen base attempts per game. Yeah, those steals from last year, they aren't coming back. No way. And again, look at the career stats. Last year was such an outlier. He had never even hit double digits in steals. And all of a sudden he gets 21. We knew that wasn't happening, and it's definitely not in San Francisco. And as far as the power, I already said this, going to Oracle Park, playing in San Francisco is definitely a big downgrade, one of the worst for power hitters. Look, before it gets too much farther in the season, you really got to look and ask yourself, is this guy I want to roll out there at shortstop every single day of the rest of the season? It shouldn't be. Look, there are plenty of good options at shortstop. You should not have to sell yourself short at one of the most important positions. And so I don't think is an absolute must cut, at least in all leagues, but I think it's okay to do it. You can move on, and better to do it now. All right, now let's talk pitching. A lot of questions about Jack Flaherty, who was a revelation last year. Guy wasn't even drafted in a lot of leagues, wound up being amazing ace status. Back to Detroit, and it hasn't gone so well for him lately. Actually started out the season fine, but in his last 13 and 2/3 innings, he's given up 13 earned runs, and he's allowed at least 4 runs in each of his last 3 starts. Now this happens, right? Pitchers have ups and downs, and even though he's technically a veteran, Flaherty hasn't been around the block forever, and he's had so much time missed with injuries. Sure, he'll have his rough patches, but what I think is most concerning is that we can't excuse the schedule. He wasn't facing the Dodgers or the Yankees. He faced the Rangers, the Astros, and the Angels, and he was getting lit up. Now, I understand those teams have gotten better offensively, but still, you shouldn't be that bad against all of those teams. So this is kind of a tipping point for Flaherty owners. Do you keep rolling with him and hope he doesn't keep hurting you, or do you move on? Well, as I look into Flaherty's numbers, I'm mostly encouraged. First of all, the strikeout numbers are still there. Got a 29.1% K rate. That's still really good. And, there's really not much difference from these last couple of starts to the previous few starts where he was solid, or even last year where he was excellent. He's not losing any velocity whatsoever, and that's definitely encouraging for a guy who has all sorts of injuries in his past. Now, the extension and the spin on some of his pitches is trending slightly downward, but it's not a huge drop from last year, and so I don't think this in and of itself is an issue. And like I said, from start to start, it hasn't changed too much. The only thing I noticed, which I don't think is even a factor, is the last couple of starts, he's relied a little bit more on the knuckle curve and a little bit less on the slider. But, all told, that's actually not a bad thing because his knuckle curve has been good. It's just a matter of location, some inconsistency. I don't see any reason to panic here about Flaherty. His next 2 starts, he could definitely get right. He's going on the road to Toronto and then to St. Louis. I think he'll get better. And so for Flaherty owners, if you're worried, I understand it, but I'm just going to keep him for now, and I'm actually going to keep him in my lineup. And I know you might think this is silly to mention a guy like Mason Miller, who's supposed to be one of the top closers in the game. And, probably not a lot of people are panicked about Mason Miller, but if you have Miller, then you're probably aware of the fact that he hasn't had a very good week lately. Gave up that walk-off grand slam to the Marlins that hugely inflated his numbers. And even though he did get a save again just a couple of days ago, he gave up a run in that outing. So now he's sporting a 4.70 ERA, and he's given up at least a run in 2 of his last 3 outings. So is there reason for concern with Miller? Nah. I'm mentioning it just to calm your nerves and let you know there's no reason to doubt Miller. Look, he gave up a grand salami. It just so happened it was an opposite field shot to a red-hot hitter in Stowers. It's fine. It's not a big deal. The 1 run the other day, he was bound to give up a run eventually. Nothing to worry about. Mason Miller, you've got him. Keep him, and keep him the rest of the season. And keep it locked right here the rest of the season. Got fancy advice for you all season long. Check out our latest video, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you know as soon as we go live to answer your questions.